All right, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Grizzly's Cave. This is Grizzly Andrew. And before we jump into this episode, which will be the Life of Bray Wyatt Part 3, I do want to remind the fans tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at the Nebo Community Center in Nebo, Kentucky, is the next NAW wrestling event. Doors will open at 6 p.m. Ticket prices are as follows: free for anybody ages 0 to 5, $5 for anyone ages 6 to 12, and then $8 for anybody ages 13 and up. Concessions will be provided, and I promise, folks, you will not be disappointed. All right, so last episode, when I left off, I said I was going to pick up with the return of the Wyatt family. And again, just as a disclaimer, I will be reading from wikipedia.org. So we're going to jump back to June 14th, 2015. And if you all will remember, I ended the episode talking about when Bray Wyatt had defeated Ryback at the Payback pay per view on May 17th. So fast forward a month later. Now, Bray Wyatt was not scheduled for a match. However, he did interfere in the Money in the Bank ladder match and he attacked Roman Reigns. Bray Wyatt was defeated by Reigns in a qualification match on Raw. So basically, with that match, I do remember Roman was climbing the ladder and he got to the top and he was right at the point of detaching the briefcase from the hook. And then all of a sudden, the infamous Wyatt vignette appears on the television screen. And then you look back, and then there's Bray Wyatt underneath the ladder, and he's decked out in his little butcher apron and stuff that he'd wear from time to time, and basically knocks Roman off the ladder and costs him the match. And this really had the potential for a really good storyline if it was booked long enough and booked properly. There were these, I guess you could say, vignettes or skits, whatever you want to call it. You would see like pictures of Roman on a mirror or something like that, and it would have the red X's over his eyes and all that. And then you would see also written on the glass, anybody but you, Roman. And a buddy of mine, I'll leave him nameless, he would say, "Is this a shoot?" For me, it was, I mean, let's just be real, folks. I mean, Roman Reigns, he was getting booed out of the buildings by the fans and all that. But I will say this. I mean, I thought McMahon had some good ideas, and if he was the one that booked that, I mean, that was actually not a bad idea. I'll give him credit for that. So Wyatt and Reigns wound up having a match at the Battleground pay per view on July 19th. Bray Wyatt would go over in the match due to assistance from the return of Luke Harper. So the Wyatt family is right now at the point of rebuilding back up. Eric Rowan wasn't present at this time because he was out with an injury. Well, so where do we go from here? Let's build onto this storyline, and then let's have a tag team match at SummerSlam of that year. And so Wyatt and Harper teamed up to take on Reigns and Dean Ambrose. Um, Reigns and Ambrose did win that match. I don't know. I really think that Bray and Harper should have won that match. Again, if this was booked and promoted properly, I think it would have been awesome. But anyways, Reigns and Ambrose won the match. And then the next night on Raw, this is when the big boy gets introduced to the Wyatt family. And if for the folks that have watched wrestling for a long time, you'll know who I'm talking about. There's a rematch, and then after a Wyatt vignette appears on the screen, and obviously in the arena the lights go off, and then it'll go back to the ring, and the lights will come back on. Well, there's this big. I'll, I'll just say how it was from my vantage point. There's this big behemoth standing on the apron, and he's wearing a black sheep mask. And I mean, this guy is probably as big as a freaking tank. And it turns out to be Braun Strowman. And for those of you that don't know, I was a big Strowman fan. He's another one that I feel like WWE really dropped the ball with. Like Daniel Bryan and others before him, he was he had a lot of momentum going, especially 2017, 2018, and even into 2019. But they failed to capitalize on that, and yeah, he just basically got screwed, in my opinion. I mean, for a big guy, he could move. He was very much over with the fans, and I was also, um, he coined the phrase "get these hands," at the beginning of 2018, and then that became a thing that the fans would chant, similar to fans chanting yes for Daniel Bryan or feed me more for Ryback. I mean, Braun Strowman was over, and he should have been champion a lot earlier than what he was. But I digress. Strowman basically beat up Ambrose and Reigns, and he's basically going to be positioned as the heavy for the group. So where do they go with this? So at the Night of Champions pay-per-view on September 20th, there's a six-man tag match that's booked. It's the Wyatt family, being Bray, Strowman, and Harper, and they're going to take on Reigns, Ambrose, and it was originally booked as a mystery partner. The mystery partner turned out to be Chris Jericho, and it actually was not a bad match. The Wyatt family was victorious, and after the match, there was a little bit of tension teased. There was a gathering in the ring with Reigns, Ambrose, and Jericho, and the last thing that I remember seeing was Jericho shoving Reigns and Ambrose out of the way and walking to the back. There was a little bit of booze, so it was kind of a tease for a Jericho heel turn. It seemed like. And then how do we go forward with this? Well, Hell in a Cell on October 25th. Reigns and Wyatt were in a Hell in a Cell match, and this would be the culmination of their feud. And it wasn't a bad match. I will say again, it was not a bad match. But in my opinion, Bray Wyatt should have come out on top out of this feud. That's just my opinion. However, Roman Reigns won the match, and this ended their feud. However, the Wyatt family did not go away quietly. And folks, if you watched the 2015 Hell in a Cell pay per view, you'll know what I'm talking about. But for the listeners that are not aware, the main event of that Hell in a Cell pay per view was Undertaker versus Brock Lesnar. Now that was a brutal match, and this was going to be the culmination of Taker and Lesnar's feud. And if you folks will remember, they had a match a couple of months earlier at a for SummerSlam, and that was the main event as well. So you had Lesnar breaking the streak at WrestleMania 30, and then about a year and a half later, Taker got a decisive victory when Lesnar passed out to the Hell's Gate submission at the SummerSlam pay per view. So, what better way to finish it? Hell in a Cell. Well, after Brock Lesnar won the match, the infamous Wyatt family vignette appears on the screen, and then I'm sitting there with my buddies. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Well, then all of a sudden, the Wyatt family music hits the arena, and Bray Wyatt, he's walking down to the ring carrying the lantern. The rest of the Wyatt family is with him. They attack the Undertaker, and they carry they carry his body back to the backstage area, and that's how Hell in a Cell ends. So the next night on Raw, Bray Wyatt is confronted by Undertaker's brother, Kane. Kane gets attacked by the Wyatt family, and then he is also carried backstage. So it kind of makes you think, well, are Taker and Kane going to join the Wyatt family, or what is this going to lead up to? And no, folks, the Brothers of Destruction did not join the Wyatt family. Although, I will say this. What if? What if the Brothers of Destruction joined the Wyatt family? Folks, that would be one of the most dominant factions in wrestling history. But, that's neither here nor there. On the November 9th episode of Raw, the Brothers of Destruction returned, and then they attacked the Wyatt family, and this led to a tag team match at the Survivor Series pay-per-view. And it was Kane and Taker against Harper and Bray. And again, it was a good match. One of a couple of highlights from that match. The first one was the Brothers of Destruction did a double choke slam to Braun Strowman through one of the announce tables. That got a big reaction out of the crowd. The other one was when Undertaker was making his entrance to the ring. I can't remember if it was a Titantron or one of these side screens that they would have this like for their pay-per-views, just for like special effects. They were showing screenshots of Undertaker throughout his years in the WWE. They would show photos of him when he first started wearing the black trench coat, the gray gloves, the gray boot covers, and then they showed him with the purple gloves, purple boot covers, the Lord of Darkness, the American Badass, and then when he came back as the Dead Man, I thought that was a pretty good uh, homage to Taker. And I started thinking, I'm wondering if this is going to be his last match. Just to show kind of a highlight reel of that. But obviously, that wasn't the case because Taker continued to wrestle for another 5 years before he initially retired at the 2020 Survivor Series. So, after the Wyatt family loses to the Brothers of Destruction, well, what's next? Well, they started having a feud with the ECW alumni, such as the Dudleys and Rhino. So at the TLC pay per view, which was on December 13th, there was going to be an 8-man tag team elimination tables match. And before the match even began, me and my buddies said to each other, did WWE forget the Survivor Series was the previous month? Since Survivor Series usually has the elimination tag matches and stuff like that. Um, Long story short, Rowan had returned from injury, so we had all four members of the Wyatt family. The ECW alumni, they announced their mystery partner as Tommy Dreamer. It wasn't. It was again. It was a good match. It kept me entertained. The Wyatt family won the match. The I guess we could say the sole survivors of the match was Bray, Harper, and Braun Strowman. Um, Now, fast forward to the following month at the 2016 Royal Rumble, and for those of you that may remember, for that Royal Rumble match, Roman Reigns entered in at number one as the reigning um, WWE World Heavyweight Champion, and he had to defend that title in that match. And obviously, if he got eliminated, he lost the belt. Oh, folks, don't tell Vince I said belt. I don't want to get fined again. But Bray Wyatt didn't exactly have as strong of a showing as he had had the previous year. To be quite honest with you, the Wyatt family basically got obliterated by Brock Lesnar. Um, he wound up suplexing pretty much all of them except Bray. He eliminated Braun, Rowan, and Harper. And the thing is, though, is the Wyatt family did not go away quietly, and they wound up dogpiling Brock Lesnar, beat him up pretty good. Bray Wyatt gave him a kiss on the forehead and delivered the Sister Abigail, and then they tossed Lesnar out right after. So it's given the impression that there may be a potential WrestleMania match between Brock and Bray. Me personally, I would have loved to have seen that. I mean, I think we all know what the outcome was going to be if that match would have happened, but um, after the Royal Rumble, WWE had a pay per view called Roadblock. It's not really used as much anymore, to my knowledge, except for like NXT pay per views. Well, Brock was booked against Wyatt and Harper in a handicap match. Well, Brock Lesnar won the match. It really wasn't much of a match. Bray Wyatt stayed outside of the ring, circling around the ring a bunch. Poor Harper, Brody Lee, God rest his soul. He was taken from us way too soon. Harper got basically taken to Suplex City and then eventually got hit with an F5, and Brock won the match. I don't remember exactly when, but I want to say within a week or two after that match, I remember reading something on, it was either Ringside News, which I think back then would, no, let me think here. Hold on, folks. Back then it was lordsofpain.net, but it's now been renamed to ringsidenews.com. I remember reading something that said that the planned match was not going to happen, and supposedly Brock and Bray were both upset about it because I think they both really wanted to work each other, and I mean they already laid the foundation in the Royal Rumble that could lead up to that match. Um, Instead, Brock wound up wrestling Dean Ambrose at Mania that year. Bray Wyatt wasn't even booked to wrestle. None of the Wyatt family was booked for anything, even the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. However, they did get to make an appearance. If you all will remember at WrestleMania 32, there was a segment where The Rock made a special appearance and he had basically had a flamethrower and he was lighting up some signs or whatever on the entrance ramp. And, he gets in, cuts a promo and stuff. Well, eventually, during his promo, the Wyatt family enters, and Bray and Rock are having a little bit of an exchange. But honestly, during the promo, The Rock was, well, for all intents and purposes, he was actually putting over Bray Wyatt. He complimented him on his charisma and his abilities and stuff and all that. And the fans were actually cheering. And I was like, well, I'll be dang, we may have a Bray Wyatt face turn, which it could work if promoted properly. But long story short, I don't know what it is with WWE, but they have been upset. They were obsessed for a long time with having these matches that were really short and that broke records from other manias and all that. I'm gonna guess, and I can't say for certain, but I'm gonna guess that Bray was injured, and I say that because he played no part in that handicap match against Brock, and he wasn't booked for anything at Mania for this year. So I'm thinking he might have been injured. Um, so The Rock challenged anybody from the Wyatt family to an impromptu match. Eric Rowan accepted whatever. Let's see, Rock was wearing a sleeveless shirt and some windbreaker not prance pants. I think the ones that had the buttons or whatever, you see basketball players wearing them and stuff like that. Uh, Rock had his wrestling tights and his wrestling boots on and stuff. The bell rang. I think not Harper, I'm sorry. Rowan went for a clothesline. Rock ducked, hit him with a rock bottom, pinned him. It was like apparently 6 seconds. Well, then the Wyatts, as always, they don't go away quietly. So they attacked The Rock, and then John Cena wound up making a save, and then you know Cena and Rock were posing in the ring and all this and that. Well, the next night on Raw, which this was the April 4th episode, like I said, they were kind of starting to tease a Bray Wyatt face turn. You folks may or may not remember, but there was a faction called the League of Nations. It consisted of Sheamus, Alberto Del Rio, Rusev, and Wade Barrett, or I should say King Barrett. Wyatt family attacked the League of Nations, and it didn't really make any sense. It was basically an unexplained feud. Um, However, which let me backtrack. Personally, I think it might have been a good launching pad for the Wyatt family to have to go on a face turn, and I say that because around that time, the New Day, which the New Day had been heels for well over a year, and about a month before Mania, they turned face and then they feuded with the League of Nations. However, New Day lost at WrestleMania against the League of Nations, but then the New Day became like pretty much the hottest tag team baby faces that WWE had had in a long time. But anyways, I digress. I think it would have been a good launching pad for a Wyatt family face turn, and it could have worked. However, though, on April 13th, during a match against Roman Reigns at a live event in Italy, Wyatt suffered an injury to his right calf, and then he was pulled off WWE's European tour. And sadly, the injury prematurely ended his feud. Fast forward 2 months later to the June 20th episode of Raw. I mentioned the New Day. Well, the Wyatt family started a feud with the New Day. Basically, it happened because the New Day interrupted Bray Wyatt during his return speech, and this shifted the Wyatt family back to heels. Um, the New Day would later confront the Wyatt family over at the Wyatt family compound. Now, all right, so here's the thing. So I watched that clip where they, attacked the Wyatts at their compound. It wasn't like something that was quickly filmed and stuff, to put on. Let me just give an example. You folks will remember back during the Attitude Era when The Rock knocked Stone Cold Steve Austin off the bridge into the water, then threw Stone Cold's belt in the river and all that. This was nothing short like that. This was almost as if like it was a cinematic match. And if you folks will remember, in the summer of 2016, TNA did something similar with that. They had a cinematic style match between Broken Matt Hardy and Jeff Hardy at the Hardy family compound. I hate to say it like this, and this is just my opinion, but I believe WWE was um, piggybacking off what TNA had done. And honestly, it was a big success for TNA with what they did. And I hate to say it, but I believe WWE was riding their coattails on that. And I don't know. I don't know what you folks think, but um, you folks will know that WWE did have a few more cinema style matches as the years went on. I think they should have just left that alone and let TNA have that. But it's Vince McMahon. What do you expect? All right. So after after that showdown at the Wyatt family compound, there was a six-man tag match at the July 24th Battleground pay-per-view, and I remember watching this match, and the Wyatt family was successful. One of the key moments in the match, it was there towards the end. Xavier Woods was in the ring with Bray Wyatt, and I mean, Xavier was scared shitless, kind of like when someone confronts some kind of scary monster or whatever, facing their fears. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Bray that actually pinned Xavier in that match. But I thought it told a good story, you know, but WWE hasn't always been the best at extending storylines. Usually, it's about a 2 month feud, if that, maybe 3 months if we're lucky, and then it just gets they pull the plug on it afterwards. Me personally, and I know I sound like an old school zealot, but I mean, I think if you're going to do a program, it needs to be at least 6 months to a year because you get more people drawn in and stuff and all that, and there's good payout at the end of it if you're able to draw. So after that, shortly after, they had the WWE draft, and Bray Wyatt and Eric Rowan, they were drafted to SmackDown, and then Strowman, he stayed with the Raw brand. And this was actually the start for Braun Strowman getting his singles push and being, well, eventually becoming the monster among men, basically, as he was notably named. On the August 16th episode of SmackDown, Wyatt walked away from Rowan after Rowan lost his match against Dean Ambrose, and he left Rowan's sheet mask on Wyatt's rocking chair. Okay, so we're definitely teasing a split. Shortly after, Bray Wyatt confronted Randy Orton, and he called Orton damaged and challenged him to a match at the Backlash pay per view, which Orton accepted on the August 30th episode of SmackDown Live. So yeah, let's go back in time here. So um, SmackDown was renamed SmackDown Live. They were showing they were going to show the live rendition of it on, I believe it was Tuesdays. Yes, yeah, it was Tuesdays. And they were also gearing back to what they did a previous decade before, where Raw would have their own pay per view and SmackDown would have their own pay per view. So basically, WWE's running two pay per views a month at this time. I don't know about you all, but I preferred the SmackDown pay per views over Raw's pay per views, but that's just me. and him calling Randy Orton damaged. So if you folks will remember at the 2016 SummerSlam pay per view, Randy Orton main evented against Brock Lesnar, and that was a very brutal match to watch, especially at the end. And if you all will remember, when Brock Lesnar takes the gloves off his hands, it's basically it's not going to end well for whoever he's in the ring with. I do remember him laying. Sorry, folks, that's my dog shaking and wiggling and stuff, and you can hear her dog tags rattling. Sorry about that. Brock delivered those vicious elbow shots to Randy's forehead, to his head, and legit busted him open. And Orton actually suffered a pretty bad concussion from it. And so I guess that's they were going to play off of that with Bray calling Randy damaged. That's a whole other story for another time. But long story short, I thought that was bullshit that they allowed Lesnar to do that to Randy Orton, because that could have done a lot more damage to him than just a concussion. That's all I'm going to say on that. Um, so Backlash was on September the 11th, and before I add on to that, one of the things I did like about that pay per view was AJ Styles won his first WWE Championship when he beat Dean Ambrose for the belt. I was pretty ecstatic about that, because AJ Styles had just been in the bit had just started with the company like 4 or 5 months earlier, and he was finally getting a push. It kind of seemed like, no, I'll take that back. I'm sorry. Styles debuted at the 2016 Royal Rumble, but it just kind of seemed like he was just going to be jobbed out. But I was surprised Vince actually went with him to be champion. And but anyways, I digress. So the Wyatt Orton match never happened. Um, let's see, Wyatt wound up attacking Randy Orton before the match, and he wound up winning by forfeit. However, Wyatt's night was not done, because he wound up facing Kane in a no holds barred match, in which Wyatt wound up losing after Randy Orton interfered. Now, I got to say this: that's some good storytelling, and it seems like they've got something good going. Well, Orton wound up challenging Wyatt to another match at the October 9th No Mercy pay per view. Wyatt accepted. One other thing about this pay per view is Orton and Wyatt, they main evented the pay per view, and I mean, there was no title on the line, no special stipulations, but those two got to main event it, and I thought that was pretty awesome. Bray Wyatt wound up winning the match after Harper had returned. And it was funny because Randy's getting ready to put Bray Wyatt away. Then all of a sudden the lights go out and the Wyatt family vignette appears on the screen, and then it comes back inside the ring after the lights come back on. There's Harper standing right in front of Randy, and his eyes all big and bugged out and mouth wide open like a crazy man. And yeah, Bray Wyatt wound up taking advantage and won the match. So kind of seems like they're going in the right direction finally. On the October 25th episode of SmackDown Live, Wyatt had another match with Kane. Here's where this became a head scratcher for me. Orton interfered, but on Bray Wyatt's behalf. And I'm thinking, where are we going with it? Like I said, when it seems like things are going in a good direction, then all of a sudden things go in a complete opposite direction. And it was just one of the things that just didn't make sense at the time. But, that's neither here nor there. Um, so, yeah, Randy Orton is now a member of the Wyatt family. Um, and we'll talk about, and and I'll talk about some more of this on the next episode. I think I'm going to end it there for tonight. Um, I think I'm going to kind of do this for. I think I'm going to, when it's just solo episodes, I think I'm just going to keep it to about a half hour. I noticed I had a lot more views on my last episode with Bray Wyatt. And it was only about a 30-minute episode. So I think I may just stick with that going forward, because the last thing I want to do is bore the listeners. Um, so, folks, again, I do want to thank you all for your support. Thank you for those that listened to the episodes. Thank you to those that have subscribed. I will have the episode uploaded hopefully within the next hour. So again, thank you all for your support, and we will begin. We'll pick up on the next episode with Randy Orton being in the Wyatt family, and then Bray Wyatt's first ever championship win. So, folks, thank you again. This is going to conclude this episode of Grizzly's Cave. This is Grizzly Andrew saying take care and God bless.